Goggle Land, Queen Galaxa, and the Mikkamenkies people. A hidden realm beneath the Earth's surface. Discover the secrets of the transparent Mikkamenkies, ruled by the ailing Queen Galaxa, and unravel a royal mystery involving a switched princess and a speck in her heart. Navigate the strange customs of this underground city, combat the dreaded Iberofrosnia, and restore the rightful heir to the Crystal Throne? Underground Journey. Part 2. The Marble Highway Journey and the Land of the Transparent Folk. So heavy with sleep did my eyelids become at last that I knew that it must be night in the outer world, and so we halted, and I stretched myself at full length on that marble floor, which, by the way, was pleasantly warm beneath us. And the air, too, was strangely comforting to the lungs, there being a complete absence of that smell of earth and odor of dampness so common in vast subterranean chambers. My sleep was long continued and most refreshing. Bulger was already awake, however, when I sat up and tried to look about me. He began tugging at the string which I had fastened to his collar, as if he wanted to lead me somewhere, so I humored him and followed along after. To my delight, he led me straight to a pool of deliciously sweet and cold water. Here we drank our fill, and after a very frugal breakfast on some dried figs, set out again on our journey along the marble highway. Suddenly, to my more than joy, the faint and uncertain light of the place began to strengthen. Why, it seemed almost as if the day of the upper world were about to break. So delicate were the various hues in which the ever-increasing light clothed itself. Then, as if affrighted at its own increasing glory, it would fade away again to almost gloom. At many moments again this faint and mysterious glow would return, beginning with the softest yellow, then changing through a dozen different tints, and, like a fickle maid uncertain which to wear, put all aside and don the lily's garb. Bulger and I wandered along the marble highway, almost afraid to break a stillness so deep that it seemed to me as if I could hear those sportive rays of light in their play against the many-colored rocks arching this mighty corridor. Now, as the marble highway swept around in a graceful curve, a dazzling flood of light burst upon us. It was sunrise in the world within a world. Whence came this flood of dazzling light which now caused the sides and arching roof to glow and sparkle, as if we had suddenly entered one of nature's vast storehouses of polished gems? Shading my eyes with my hand, I looked about me in order to try and solve the mystery. It did not take me long to understand it all. Know then, dear friends, that the ceilings, domes, and arched roofs of this underground world were fretted with a metal of greater hardness than any known to us children of sunshine. Its seams ran hither and thither like the veins of gigantic leaves, and at certain hours currents of electricity from some vast internal reservoir of nature's own building streamed through these metal traceries until they glowed with a heat so white as to give off the flood of dazzling light of which I have already spoken. The current never came with a sudden rush or burst, but began gently and timidly, so to speak, as if feeling its way along. Hence the beautiful tints that always preceded sunrise in this lower world, and made it so much like the coming and going of our glorious sunshine. The marble highway now divided, and the two halves of the fork curving away to the right and left, enclosed a small but exquisitely ornamented park, or pleasure ground I might call it, provided with seats of some dark wood beautifully polished and carved. This park was ornamented with 4 fountains, each springing from a crystal basin and spreading out into a feathery spray that glistened like whirling snow in the dazzling white light. As Bulger and I directed our steps toward one of the benches with the intention of taking a good rest, a low growl from him warned me to be on the alert. I gave a second look. A human being was seated on the bench. Beside myself as I was with curiosity to come face to face with this inhabitant of the underworld, the first we had met, I made a halt, determined to ascertain, if possible, whether he was quite harmless, before accosting him. He was small in stature, and clad entirely in black, a sort of loose flowing robe much like a Roman toga. His head was bare, and what I could see of it was round, smooth, and rosy, with about as much hair, or rather fuzz, upon it as the head of an infant 6 weeks old. His face was hidden by a black fan which he carried in his right hand, and the uses of which you will learn later on. His eyes were shielded from the intense glare of the light by a pair of colored glass goggles. As he raised his hand between me and the light, I couldn't help catching my breath. I could see right through it. The bones were as clear as amber, and his head, too, was only a little less opaque. Suddenly, 2 words from Don Fum's manuscript flashed through my mind, and I exclaimed joyously, "Bulger, we're in the land of the transparent folk." At the sound of my voice, the little man arose and made a low bow, lowering his fan to his breast where he held it. His baby face was ludicrously sad and solemn. "Yes, a stranger," said he in a low musical voice. "Thou art indeed in the land of the Mikkamenkies men, in the land of the transparent folk, called also Goggle land. But if I should show thee my heart, thou wouldst see that I am deeply pained to think that I should have been the first to bid thee welcome, for know, sir stranger, that thou speakest with Master Cold Soul, the court depressor, the saddest man in all Goggle land. And, by the way, sir, permit me to offer thee a pair of goggles for thyself, and also a pair for thy 4-footed companion, for our intense white light would blind thee both in a few days. I thanked Master Cold Soul very warmly for the goggles, and proceeded to set one pair astride my nose and to tie the other in front of Bulger's eyes. I then in most courteous manner informed Master Cold Soul who I was, and begged him to explain the cause of his great sadness. "Well, thou must know, little Baron," said he, after I had taken a seat beside him on the bench, "that we, the loving subjects of Queen Galaxa, whose royal heart is almost run down, excuse these tears, living as we do in this beautiful world so unlike the one you inhabit, which our wise men tell us is built, strange to say, on the very outside of the earth's crust, where it is most exposed to the full sweep of blinding snow, freezing blasts, pelting hail, drowning rain, and choking dust. Living as we do, I say, in this vast temple by nature's own hands builded, where disease is unknown, and where our hearts run down like clocks that may have but one winding, we are prone, alas, to be too happy, to laugh too much, to spend too much time in idle gaiety, chattering the time away like thoughtless children, amused with baubles, delighted with tinsel nothings. Know then, little Baron, that mine is the business to check this gaiety, to put an end to this childish glee, to depress our people's spirits, lest they run too high. Hence my garb of inky hue, my rueful countenance, my frequent outflowing of tears, my voice ever attuned to sadness. Excuse me, little Baron, my fan slipped in, did see through me. I would not have thee see my heart today, for some way or other I cannot bring it to a slow pace. It is dreadfully unruly. I assured him that I had not seen through him as yet. And now, dear friends, I must explain that by the laws of the Mikkamenkies, each man, woman, and child must wear in their garments a heart-shaped opening on their breast directly over their hearts, with a corresponding one at the back, so that under certain conditions when the law allows it, each may have the right to take a look at his neighbor's heart and see exactly how it is beating, whether fast or slow, whether throbbing or leaping, or whether pulsating calmly and naturally. But this privilege is only accorded, as I have said, under certain conditions. Hence, to shut off inquisitive glances, each Mikkamenkie is allowed to carry a black fan with which to cover the heart-shaped opening above described, and in this way conceal his or her feelings to a degree. I say to a degree, for I may as well tell you right here that falsehood is unknown, or more correctly stated, impossible in the land of the transparent folk, for the reason that so wondrously clear, limpid, and crystal-like are their eyes that the slightest attempt to say one thing while they are thinking another roils and clouds them as if a drop of milk had fallen into a glass of the purest water. As I sat gazing at this strange little being seated on the bench there beside me, I recalled a conversation which I had had with a learned Russian at Solvitchegodsk. Said he, speaking of his people, "We are all born with light hair, brilliant eyes, and pale faces, for we have sprung up under the snow." And I thought to myself how delighted, how entranced he would have been to look upon this curious being, born not under the snow, but far under the surface of the earth, where, in these vast chambers of this world within a world, this strange folk had, like plants grown in a dark, deep cellar, gradually parted with all their coloring until their eyes glowed like orbs of pure crystal, until their bones had been bleached to amber clearness, and their blood coursed colorless through colorless veins. While sitting there following out this train of thought, the clear white light suddenly began to flicker, and to play fantastic tricks upon the walls by dancing in garbs of ever-changing hues, now brightest yellow, now palest green, now glorious purple, now deepest crimson. "Ah, little Baron," exclaimed Master Cold Soul, "that was an uncommonly short day. Rise, please." I made haste to obey, whereupon he touched a spring and the bench opened in the center, disclosing 2 very comfortable beds. "In a few moments night will be upon us," continued the Mikkamenkie, "but thou seest that we have not been taken by surprise. I should explain to thee, little Baron, that owing to the capricious manner in which our river of light is apt both to begin and to cease flowing, we are never able to tell how long a day or a night will prove to be. This is what we call twilight. In thy world, I suppose, day goes out with a terrible bang, for our wise men tell us that nothing can be done in the upper world without making a noise, that your people really love noise, and that the man who makes the greatest noise is considered the greatest man. Owing to the fact, little Baron, that no one in Goggle land can tell how long the day will last or how long it may be necessary to sleep, our laws permit no one to set any exact time when a thing shall be done, or to exact any promise to do this or that on a certain day. For bless thy soul, that day may not be 10 minutes long. Hence we say, if tomorrow be over 5 hours long, come to me at the beginning of the 6th hour. And we never wish each other a plain good night, but say good night as long as it lasts. What's more, little Baron, as night is apt to come upon us this way unawares, by law all the beds belong to the state. No one is allowed to own his own bed, for when night overtakes him, he may be at the other end of the city, and some other subject of Queen Galaxa may be in front of his door, and no matter where night may overtake a Mikkamenkie, he is sure to find a bed. There are beds everywhere. By touching a spring, they drop from the walls, they pull out like drawers. They are under the tables and divans, in the parks, in the marketplace, by the roadside. Benches, bins, boxes, barrels and barrels, by pressing the spring may in an instant be transformed into beds. It is the land of beds, little Baron, but behold, the twilight goes to its end. Good night as long as it lasts. And with this Master Cold Soul stretched himself out and began to snore, having first carefully covered up the 2 holes in the front and back of his garment, so that I shouldn't have a chance to take a peep through him in case I should wake up first. Bulger and I were right glad to lay our limbs on a real bed, although from the way my 4-footed brother followed his tail around and around, I could see that he wasn't particularly delighted with the softness of the couch. Wonders of Goggle land and the city of the Mikkamenkies people. I don't think the darkness lasted over 3 hours, perhaps it was longer, but Master Cold Soul was obliged to shake me gently ere he could rouse me. "Now, little Baron," said he, after he had wished me a good morning with the usual, as long as it lasts, tack to it, "if thou art quite willing, I'll conduct thee to the court of our gracious mistress, Queen Galaxa. Our wise men have often discoursed to her concerning the upper world and the terrible sufferings of its people, exposed as they are to be first frozen by the pitiless cold and then burned by the scorching rays of what they call their sun, and she will no doubt deign to be pleased at sight of thee, although I must warn thee that thou art most uncomely, that thou seemst so black and hard to me as scarcely to be human, but rather a bit of living earth or rock. I greatly fear me that thou wilt make our people extremely vain by comparison. Thy 4-footed companion we know well by sight, having often seen his petrified image in the rocks of the dark chambers of our world. Master Cold Soul," said I as we walked along, "when thou gettest to know me better, thou wilt find me more comely, and although I shall not be able to show thee my heart, I hope to be able to prove to thee and thine that I have such a thing." No doubt, little Baron," exclaimed Master Cold Soul, "but be not offended. It is not more pleasant for me to tell thee these disagreeable things than it is for thee to hear them. But I am paid to do it, and I must earn my wage. Vanity grows apace in our world, and I prick its bubbles whenever I see them. To my great wonder, I now discovered that the world of the Mikkamenkies had its lakes and rivers like our own, only of course they were smaller and mirror-faced, being never visited by the faintest zephyr. To my question as to whether they were people with living things, Master Cold Soul informed me that they literally swarmed with the most delicious fish, both in scales and shells. But think not, little Baron, he added, that we of Goggle land have no other food than such as we draw from the water. For in our gardens grow many kinds of delicate vegetables, springing up in a single night, almost as light as foam and just as white. But we are small eaters, little Baron, and rarely find it necessary to put to death a large shellfish. We merely lay hold of his great claw, which he obligingly drops into our hand, and forthwith sets about growing another. But tell me, I pray thee, Master Cold Soul, said I, where ye find the silk to weave such soft and beautiful stuff as that thy garment is fashioned from. In this underworld of ours, little Baron, replied Master Cold Soul, there are many vast recesses not reached by the river of light, and in these dark chambers flit about huge night moths, like restless spirits forever on the wing. But of course they are not, for we find their eggs glued against the rocky sides of these caverns and collect them carefully. The worms that are hatched from them spin huge cocoons so large that one may not be hidden in my hand, and these unwound give unto our looms all the thread they need. And the beautiful wood, I continued, which I see about me carved and fashioned into so many articles, whence comes it? From the quarries, answered Master Cold Soul. Quarries? I repeated wonderingly. Why, yes, little Baron, said he, for we have quarries of wood, as no doubt thou hast quarries of stone. All wise men tell us that thousands and thousands of years ago vast forests grown in your world were in the upheavals and fallings in of the earth's crust thrust down into ours, the gigantic trunks wedged closely together, and standing bolt upright just as they grew. At least so we find them when we have dug away the hardened clay that has shut them in these many ages. But see, little Baron, we are now entering the city. Yonder is the royal palace. Wilt walk with me thither? Ah, dear friends, would that I could make you see this beautiful city of the underworld just as it showed itself to me then, spread out so gloriously beneath the glittering domes and vaulted corridors, from which poured down upon the exquisitely carved and polished entrances to the living chambers of this happy folk a flood of white light apparently more dazzling than our noonday sun. It was a sight so strangely beautiful that many times I paused to gaze upon it. Young and old, all clad in the same gracefully flowing garbs of silk, now purple, now royal blue, and now rich vermilion, were hurrying hither and thither, each armed with the inevitable black fan, and the baby face of each aglow with life and sweet content, while 100 fountains springing from crystal basins glistened in the dazzling white light, and 10 times 100 flags and gonfalons hung listless but rich in splendor from invisible wires. Strange music came floating along from the gracefully shaped barges with silken awnings which were gliding noiselessly over the surface of the winding river, the oars stirring the waters until the wake seemed a path through molten silver. As Bulger and I followed Master Cold Soul along the streets of polished marble, it was not long before a crowd of Mikkamenkies was at our heels, whispering all sorts of uncomplimentary things about us, mingled with not a few fits of suppressed laughter. The court depressor reproved them sternly. "Cease your ill-timed mirth," said he, "and go about your business. Must I pause and tell you a gruesome tale to check your foolish gaiety? Know ye not that all this silly mirth doth quicken your hearts and make them run down just so much sooner?" At these words of Master Cold Soul they fell back and put an end to their giggling, but it was only for a moment, and by the time we reached the portal of the royal palace, a still louder and noisier crowd was close behind us. Master Cold Soul suddenly halted, and drawing forth a huge pocket handkerchief, began to weep furiously. It was not without its effect, and from that moment I could see that the Mikkamenkies were inclined to take a more serious view of my arrival in their city, although it was only Cold Soul's presence. that kept them from bursting out into fits of violent laughter. Above the portals of the Queen's palace there were large openings hewn in the rock for the purpose of admitting light into the royal apartments. But these windows, if they may be called such, were hung with silken curtains of delicate colors, so that the light which entered the throne room was tempered and softened. The room itself was likewise hung with silken stuffs, which gave it a look of oriental splendor, but never in my travels among strange peoples of faraway lands had my eyes ever rested upon any work of art that equaled the crystal throne upon which sat Galaxa, Queen of the Mikkamenkies. In the upper world, most diligent search had never been able to unearth a piece of rock crystal more than about 3 feet in diameter. But here in Queen Galaxa's throne, 4 glorious columns at least 15 feet in height, and at their base 3 feet in diameter, shot up in matchless splendor, their lower part shut in spangles of gold that glittered with ever-varying hues as a different light fell upon them. The cross pieces and pieces making up the back and arms had been chosen on account of the exquisitely beautiful hair and needle-shaped crystals of other metals which they enclosed. A silken baldachin of rare beauty covered in the throne, and from its edges dropped heavy cords and tassels of rich color and the perfection of human handicraft as to fineness and finish. At the foot of the throne sat the young Princess Crystallina, and standing behind her and engaged in combing her long silken tresses was her favorite waiting maid, Demoiselle Glowstone, while around and about, in files and groupwise, stood lords and ladies, courtiers and counselors, by the dozen, as Master Cold Soul advanced to salute the Queen. A throng of the idlers who had followed at our heels crowded into the anteroom with loud outbursts of laughter. The court depressor was greatly incensed, and turning upon the throng he began weeping again with wonderful energy, but I noticed that it was nothing but sound. Not a tear fell to obscure the crystal clearness of his eyes. Then he began chanting a sort of song which was intended to have a depressing influence on the wild mirth of the Mikkamenkies. I can only recollect one verse of this solemn chant of the court depressor. It ran as follows: "Weep, Mikkamenkies, weep, oh weep, for the eyeless man in the city of light, for the mouthless man in plenty's bowers, for the earless man in music's realm, for the noseless man in the kingdom of flowers. Weep, Mikkamenkies, weep, oh weep." But they only laughed the louder, crying out, "Nay, Master Cold Soul, we will not weep for them thyself." At last Queen Galaxa raised the slender golden wand, tipped with a diamond point that lay within her hand, and instantly a hush came upon the whole place, while every eye was riveted upon Bulger and me. Queen Galaxa, the lady of the crystal throne, and the 3 wise men. Owing to the soft air, the never-varying temperature, and the absence of all noise and dust, the Mikkamenkies, although they die in the end like other folk, yet do they never seem to grow old. Their skin remains soft and free from wrinkles, and their eyes as clear and bright as the crystal of Queen Galaxa's throne. At the time of our arrival in the land of the transparent folk, Queen Galaxa's heart had almost run down. In about 2 weeks more it would come quietly and gently to a stop, for, as I have already told you, dear friends, the heart of a Mikkamenkie being perfectly visible when the dazzling white light in its full strength was allowed to shine through his body, why, it was a very easy matter for a physician to take a look at the organ of life and tell almost to the hour when it would exhaust itself, in other words, run down. Galaxa looked every inch a real queen as she half reclined upon her glorious crystal throne. She was clad in long, flowing silk garments of a right royal purple, and the gems which encircled her neck and wrists would have put to shame the crown jewels of any monarch of the upper world. Her garb had very much the cut and style of the ancient Greek costume, and the gold sandals worn by her added to the resemblance. But the one thing that excited my wonder more than all the others put together was her hair. So long, so fine and silken was it, such a mass of it was there, and so dazzling white was it, not the blue or yellow white that comes of age in our world, but a milk white, a cotton white. And as we drew near, to Bulger's but not to my amazement, Her hair began to quiver and rustle and rise until it buried her whole throne completely out of sight. Of course, I knew that, seated as she was upon a throne of glass, it was only necessary to send a gentle current of electricity through her to make her wonderful head of hair stand up in this manner, like the white and filmy tentacles of some gigantic creature of the sea, half plant, half animal. "Arise, little baron," said Queen Galaxa, as I dropped upon my right knee on the lowest step of the throne, "and be welcome to our kingdom. Whilst thou may be pleased to tarry here, my people shall bestir themselves to show thee all that may seem wonderful in thine eyes. For although our wise men have often discussed to us of the upper world, yet art thou its first inhabitant to visit us, and thy wonderful companion is right welcome too." "Can he talk, little baron?" "Not exactly, Queen Galaxa," said I with low obeisance, "yet he can understand me and I him." "He is quite harmless, is he not?" asked the queen. You may try to imagine how I felt, dear friends, when, as I was about to say, "Perfectly so, royal lady," to my amazement I saw Bolger advance and sniff at the Princess Crystallina, and then draw back and show his teeth as she stretched out her hand to caress him. Bending over him, I reproved him in a whisper and bade him kneel before the queen. This he proceeded to do, saluting her with 3 very stately bows, at which everybody laughed heartily. "I would have him come nearer," said the queen, "so that I may lay my hand upon him." At a sign from me, Bolger began to lick his forepaws very carefully, and then, having wiped them on the rug, sprang up the steps of the throne and placed his front feet upon Queen Galaxa's lap. The fair ruler of the Mikkamenkies was delighted with this sample of Bolger's fine manners, and in order to amuse her still further, I proceeded to put Bolger through many of his quaint tricks and curious feats, bidding him say his prayers, feign death, weep for his sweetheart, count 10, walk upright, go lame and cry to tell how it hurts. Scarcely had he gone half around the circle, feigning lameness, when the demoiselle Glowstone began to weep herself, and stooping down commenced to caress Bolger and to kiss his lame foot, caresses which, to my more than surprise, Bolger was not slow in returning, and later too, when I bade him choose the maiden he loved best and kiss her hand, he bounded straight toward Glowstone and bestowed not 1 but 20 kisses upon her outstretched hands, while the Princess Crystallina shrank away in fear and disgust from the ugly beast, as she termed him. "Bid him bring my handkerchief to me, little baron," cried Galaxa, throwing it on the floor. I did as the queen commanded, but Bolger refused to obey. "Thou seest, Queen Galaxa," said I with a low bow, "he refuses to lift the handkerchief without a command from thy royal self," which delicate compliment pleased the lady mightily. "How comes it, little baron," she asked, "that thou shouldst be of noble lineage and thy brother, as thou callest him, plain Bolger?" "It comes, royal lady," said I right humbly, "as it often comes in the world which I inhabit, that honors go to them that least deserve them." "Well then, little baron," cried Galaxa gaily, "though I be but a petty sovereign compared with thine, yet may small rulers do acts of great justice. Bid thy 4-footed brother kneel before us." At a word from me, Bolger prostrated himself on the steps of Galaxa's crystal throne, and laid his head at her very feet. Leaning forward, she touched him lightly with her golden wand and exclaimed, "Rise, Lord Bolger, rise!" Queen Galaxa, seated on her crystal throne, bids Lord Bolger rise. In an instant, Bolger raised himself on his hind feet and laid his head in the queen's lap, while the whole room rang with loud huzzas, and every lady gently clapped her frail and glass-like hands, save the Princess Crystallina, who feigned to be asleep. Queen Galaxa now undid a string of pearls from her neck and tied them with her own hands around Lord Bolger's, and so it was that my 4-footed brother ceased to be plain Bolger. Then, turning to her counselors of state, Queen Galaxa bade them assign a royal apartment to Lord Bolger and me, and gave strict orders that the severest punishment be at once visited upon any Mikkamenkie who should dare to laugh at us or to make disrespectful remarks concerning our dark eyes and skins and weather-beaten appearance, for, As the royal lady said to her people, ye might look worse than they were, ye compelled to live on the outside instead of the inside of the world, exposed to biting blasts, piercing cold, and clouds of suffocating dust. By the queen's orders, 3 of the wisest of the Mikkamenkies were selected to attend Bulger and me, look after our wants, explain everything to us. In a word, do all in their power to make our stay in Goggle land as pleasant as possible. Their names, as nearly as I can translate them, were Dr. Nebulosus, Sir Amber Opaque, and Lord Cornucore. I should explain to you, dear friends, the meaning of these names, for you might be inclined to think that Dr. somewhat cloudy. Sir Clear as Amber and Lord Heart of Horn might indicate that they were more or less muddled in their intellects. Far from it, I have already stated to you, they were 3 of the very wisest men in the land of the transparent folk, and the lack of clearness indicated by their names had reference solely to their eyes. Now, as you know, the learned men of our upper world have a different look from ordinary folk. They are stoop-shouldered, shaggy eyebrows, long-haired, purse-lipped, nearsighted, shambling-gaited. Well, the only effect that long years of deep study had upon the Mikkamenkies was to rob their beautiful crystal-like eyes of more or less of their clearness. Now, I think you'll understand why these 3 learned Mikkamenkies were named as they were. At any rate, they were, in spite of their strange names. 3 most charming gentlemen, and no matter how many times I might ask the same question over again, they were always ready with an answer quite as polite as the one first given me. They did everything that I had a right possibly to expect them to do. Indeed, there was but one single thing which I would have fain had them do, and that was to let me look through them. This they most carefully avoided doing, and no matter how warmed up they might become in their descriptions, and no matter how on the alert I was to catch the coveted peep, the inevitable black fan was always in the way. Naturally, not only they, but all the transparent folk felt a repugnance to have a perfect stranger look through them, and I couldn't blame them for it either. I despaired of ever getting a chance of seeing a human heart beating away for dear life, for all the world just like the swing of a pendulum or the vibration of a balance wheel. Conversations with Dr. Nebulosus, Sir Amber Opaque, and Lord Cornucore, Lord Bulger and I were more than pleased with our new friends, Dr. Nebulosus, Sir Amber Opaque, and Lord Cornucore, although so eager were they to make us thoroughly comfortable that they overdid the matter at times, and left me scarcely a moment to myself in which to make an entry in my notebook. They were extremely solicitous, lest in my ignorance I should set down something wrong about them. For, said Sir Amber Opaque, now that thou hast found the way to this underworld of ours, little baron, I feel assured that we shall have a number of visitors from thy people every year or so, and I have already issued orders to have extra beds made as soon as the wood can be quarried. Dr. Nebulosus gave me a very interesting account of the various ailments which the Mikkamenkies suffer from. All sickness among our people, little baron, said he, is purely mental or emotional, that is, of the mind or feelings. There is no such thing as bodily infirmity among us. Wine and strong drink are unknown in our world, and the food we eat is light and easily digested. We are never exposed to the danger of breathing a dust-laden atmosphere, and while we are an active and industrious people, yet we sleep a great deal. For as our laws forbid the use of lamps or torches except for the use of those toiling in the dark chambers, it is not possible for us to ruin our health by turning night into day. We go to bed the very moment the river of light ceases to flow. The only ailment that ever gives me the least trouble is eburyofrosnia. Pray, what is the nature of that ailment? I asked. It is an inclination to be too happy, replied Dr. Nebulosus gravely, and I regret to say that several of our people attacked with this ailment have shortened their lives by refusing to take my remedies. It usually develops very slowly, beginning with an inclination to giggle, which after a while is succeeded by violent fits of laughter. For instance, little baron, when thou camest among us, many of our people were attacked with a violent form of eburyofrosnia, and although Master Cold Soul, The court depressor made great efforts to check it, yet he was quite powerless to do so. It spread over the city with remarkable rapidity. Without knowing why, our workmen at their work, our children at their play, our people indoors and out began to laugh and to be dangerously happy. I made examinations of several of the worst cases and discovered that at the rate they were beating, the hearts of most of them would run down in a single week. It was terrible. A council was hastily held, and it was determined to conceal thee and Lord Bulger from the public view, but happily my skill got the upper hand of the attack. Did you increase the number of pills to be taken, I asked? No, little baron, said Dr. Nebulosus. I increased their size and covered them with a dry powder, which made them extremely difficult to swallow, and in this way compelled those taking them to cease their laughing. But there were a number of cases so violent that they could not be cured in this way. These I ordered to be strapped in at the waist with broad belts, and to have their mouths held pried open with wooden wedges. As thou mayst understand, this made laughing so difficult that they speedily gave it up altogether. Ah, little baron, continued the wise doctor with a sigh, that was a sorry day for the human race when it learned how to laugh. It is my opinion that we owe this useless agitation of our bodies to you people of the upper world. Exposed as ye were to piercing winds and biting frosts, ye contracted the habit of shivering to keep warm, and little by little this shivering habit so grew upon you, that ye kept up the shivering whether ye were cold or not, only ye called it by another name. Now, my knowledge of the human body teaches me that this quivering of the flesh is a very wise provision of nature to keep the blood in motion, and in this way to save the human body from perishing from the cold. But why should we quiver when we are happy, little baron? All pleasure is the thought, and yet at the very moment when we should keep our bodies in as perfect repose as possible, we begin this ridiculous shivering. Do we shiver when we look upon the beauties of the river of light, or listen to sweet music, or gaze upon the loving countenance of our gracious Queen Galaxa? But worse than all, little baron, this senseless quivering and shivering which we call laughter, unlike good, deep, long-drawn, wholesome sighs, empty the lungs of air without filling them again. And thus do we often see these gigglers and laughers fall over in fainting fits, absolutely choked by their own wild and unreasoning action. I have always contended, little baron, that we alone of all animals had the laughing habit, and I am now delighted to have my opinion confirmed by my acquaintance with the wise and dignified Lord Bulger. Observe him. He knows quite as well as we what it is to be pleased, to be amused, to be delighted, but he doesn't think it necessary to have recourse to fits of shivering and shuddering. Through the brightened eye, true window of the soul, I can see how happy he is. I can measure his joy. I can take note of his contentment. I was delighted with this learned discourse of the gentle Dr. Nebulosus, and made notes of it lest the points of his argument might escape my memory. The more pleased was I in that he proved my faithful Bulger to be so wisely constructed and regulated by nature. I made particular inquiry of my friends, Sir Amber Opaque and Lord Cornucore, as to whether Queen Galaxa ever had any trouble in governing her people. None whatever, was the answer. In many a long year has it only been necessary on one or two occasions to summon a Mikkamenkie before the magistrate and examine his heart under a strong light. The only punishment allowed by our laws is confinement for a shorter or longer time in one of the dark chambers. The severest sentence ever known to have been passed by one of our magistrates was 12 hours in length. But in all honesty, we must admit, little baron, that falsehood and deception are unknown amongst us, for the simple reason that, being transparent, it is impossible for a Mikkamenkie to deceive a brother without being caught in the act. Therefore, why make the attempt? The very moment one of us begins to say one thing while he is thinking another, his eyes cloud up and betray him, just as the crystal clear weather glass clouds up at the approach of a storm in the upper world. But this, of course, little baron, is only true of our thoughts. Our laws allow us to hide our feelings by the use of the black fan. No one may look upon another's heart unless its owner wills it. It is a very grave offense for one Mikkamenkie to look through another without that one's permission. But as thou wilt readily understand, inasmuch as we are by nature transparent, it is utterly impossible for a marriage to prove an unhappy one, for the reason that when a youth declares his love for a maiden, they both have the right by law to look upon each other's hearts, and in this way they can tell exactly the strength of the love they have for each other. This and many other strange and interesting things did my new friends, Dr. Nebulosus, Sir Amber Opaque, and Lord Cornucore impart unto me, and right grateful was I to good Queen Galaxa for having chosen them for me. Good friends are better than gold, although we may not think it at the time. Pleasant days with the Mikkamenkies people, the Spectral Garden, and the Demoiselle Glowstone. From now on, Lord Bulger and I made ourselves perfectly at home among the Mikkamenkies. One of the royal barges was placed at our disposal, and when we grew tired of walking about and gazing at the wonders of this beautiful city of the underworld, we stepped aboard our barge and were rowed hither and thither on the glassy river. And if I had not seen it myself, I never would have believed that any kind of shellfish could ever be taught to be so obliging as to swim to the surface and offer one of their huge claws for our dinner, politely dropping it in our hand the moment we had laid hold of it. On one of the river banks I noticed a long row of wooden compartments looking very much like a grocer's bins. But you may think how amused Bulger and I were upon coming closer to this long row of little houses to find that they were turtle nests, and that quite a number of the turtles were sitting comfortably in their nests, busy laying their eggs, which, let me assure you, were the most dainty tidbits I ever tasted. I think I informed you that the river flowing through Goggle Land was fairly swarming with delicious fish, the carp and sole being particularly delicate in flavor. And knowing, as I did, what a tender-hearted folk the Mikkamenkies are, I had been not a little puzzled in my mind as to how they had ever been able to summon up courage enough to drive a spear into one of these fish, which were as tame and playful as a lot of kittens or puppies, and followed our barge hither and thither, snapping up the food we tossed to them and leaping into the air, where they glistened like burnished silver as the white light sparkled on their scales. But the mystery was solved one day when I saw one of the fishermen decoying a score or more of fish into a sort of pen shut off from the river by a wire netting. Scarcely had he closed the gates when, to my amazement, I saw the fish one after the other come to the surface and float about on their sides, stone dead. This little baron, explained the man in charge, is the death chamber. Hidden at the bottom of this dark pool lie several electric eels of great size and power. And when our people want a fresh supper of fish, we simply open these gates and decoy a shoal of them inside by tossing their favorite food into the water. The executioners are awaiting them, and in a few instants the fish, while enjoying their repast and suspecting no harm, are painlessly put to death, as thou hast seen. One part of the city of the transparent folk, which attracted Bulger and me very much, was the royal gardens. It was a weird and uncanny place, and upon my first visit I walked through its paths and beneath its arbors upon my toes, and with bated breath, as you might steal into some bit of fairyland, looking anxiously from side to side as if at every step you expected some sprite or goblin to trip you up with a tough spider web or brush your cheeks with their cold and satiny wings. Now, dear friends, you must first be told that with the loss of sunshine and the open air, the flowers and shrubs and vines of this underground world gradually parted with their perfumes and colors, their leaves and petals and stems and tendrils growing paler and paler in hue like lovelorn maids whose sweethearts had never come back from the war. Month by month, the dark greens, the blush pinks, the golden yellows, and the deep blues pined away, longing for the lost sunshine and the wooing breeze they loved so dearly, until at last the transformation was complete. And there they all stood or hung bleached to utter whiteness, like those fantastic clumps of flowers and wreaths of vines which the feathery snow of April builds in the leafless shrubs and trees. I cannot tell you, dear friends, what a strange feeling came over me as I stepped within this spectral garden, where ghost-like vines clung in fantastic forms and figures to the dark trellises, and where tall lilies, whiter than the down of eider, stood bolt upright like spirits doomed to eternal silence, denied even the speech of perfume, and where huge clusters of snowy chrysanthemums, fluffy feathery forms, seemed pressing their soft bodies together like groups of banished celestials in a sort of silent despair as they felt the warmth and glow of sunlight slowly and gradually quitting their souls, where lower down, great roses with snowy petals whiter than the seashells hung motionless, bursting open with eager effort, as if listening for some signal that would dissolve the spell put upon them, and give them back the sunshine, and with it their color and their perfume, where lower still beds of violets bleached white as fleecy clouds seemed wrapped in silent sorrow at loss of the heavenly perfume which had been theirs on earth, where above the lilies' heads shot long, slender, spectral stalks of sunflowers almost invisible, loaded at their ends with clusters of snowy flowers, thus suspended like white faces looking down through the silent air, and waiting for the sunshine that never came, and higher still all over and above these spectral flowers, entwining and enwrapping and falling festoon and garland-wise, crept and ran like unto long lines of escaping phantoms, ghostly vines with ghostly blossoms, bent and twisted and wrapped and coiled into 1,000 strange and fantastic forms and figures which the white light with its inky shadows made alive and half-human. So that movement and voice alone were needful to make this garden seem peopled with sorrowing sprites banished to these subterranean chambers for strange misdeeds done on earth and condemned to wait 10,000 years ere sunlight and their color and their perfume should be given back to them again. While strolling through the royal gardens one day, Bulger suddenly gave a low cry and bounded on ahead, as if his eyes had fallen upon the familiar form of some dear friend. When I came up with him, he was crouching beside the Demoiselle Glowstone, who, seated on one of the garden benches, was caressing Bulger's head and ears with one of her soft hands with its filmy-like skin, while the other held its black fan pressed tightly against her bosom. She looked up at me with her crystal eyes and smiled faintly as I drew near. "Thou seest, little Baron," she murmured, "Lord Bulger and I have not forgotten each other." Since our presentation at court, I had been going through and through my mind in search of some reason for Bulger's sudden affection for Demoiselle Glowstone, but had found none. I was the more perplexed, as she was but the maid of honor, while the fair Princess Crystallina sat on the very steps of the throne. But I said nothing save to reply that I was greatly pleased to see it, and to add that where Bulger's love went, mine was sure to follow. "Oh, little Baron, if I could but believe that," sighed the fair damoiselle. "Thou mayst," said I, "indeed thou mayst." "Then if I may, little Baron," she replied, "I will, and prithee come and sit beside me here, only till I bid thee look not through me. Dost promise?" "I do, fair damoiselle," was my answer. "And thou, Lord Bulger, lie there at my feet," she continued, "and keep thy wise eyes fixed upon me, and thy keen ears wide open. Little Baron, if both thine and our worlds were filled with sorrowing hearts, mine would be the heaviest of them all. List! Oh, list to the sad, sad tale of the sorrowing maid with the speck in her heart, and when thou knowest all, give me of thy wisdom, the sorrowing princess with the flaw in her crystal heart." "Little Baron and dear Lord Bulger," began the crystal-eyed damoiselle, after she had eased her soul of its load of woe by 3 long and deep, deep sighs. "Know then that I am not the Demoiselle Glowstone, but none other than the royal Princess Crystallina herself, that she whose hair I comb should comb mine, that she whom I have served for 10 long years should have served me. And to think, O Princess," I burst out joyfully, "that my beloved Bulger should have been the first to discover that she who was seated on the steps of the crystal throne was not entitled to the seat. To think that his subtle intellect should have been the first to scent out the wrong that had been done thee, his keen eye the first to go to the bottom of truth's well. But, fair princess, I am bursting with impatience to know how thou thyself didst ever discover the wrong that has been done thee." "That thou shalt speedily know, little Baron," answered Crystallina, "and that thou mayst know all that I know, I'll begin at the very beginning. The day I was born there was great rejoicing in the land of the Mikkamenkies, and the people gathered in front of the royal palace and laughed and cried by turns. So happy were they to think they were to be governed by another princess after Queen Galaxa's heart should run down. For many years ago, a bad king had made them very unhappy, and they had hoped and prayed that no more such would come to reign over them. And pretty soon one of them began to tell the others what he thought the little princess would be like. She will be the fairest that ever sat upon the crystal throne. Her hands and feet will be like pearls tipped with coral, her hair whiter than the river's foam. And from her beautiful eyes will burst the radiance of her pure soul, and her heart, oh, her heart will be like a little lump of frozen water, so clear and so transparent will it be, so like a bit of purest crystal, bright and flawless as a diamond of the first water, and therefore let her be called the Princess Crystallina, or the Maid with the Crystal Heart. Forthwith the cry went up, let her be called Crystallina, or the Maid with the Crystal Heart. And Queen Galaxa heard the cry of her people and sent them word that it should be as they wished, that I should be the Princess Crystallina. But ah me, that I should have lived to tell it. After a few days, the nurse came to my royal mother, wringing her hands and pouring down a flood of tears. Throwing herself on her knees, she whispered to the queen, "Royal mistress, bid me die rather than tell thee what I know." Being ordered to speak, the nurse informed Queen Galaxa that she had that day for the first time held me up to the light and had discovered that there was a speck in my heart. The queen uttered a cry of horror and swooned. When she came to herself, she directed that I should be brought to her and held up to the light so that she might see for herself. Alas, too true. There was the speck in my heart sure enough. I was not worthy of the sweet name which her loving people had bestowed upon me. They would turn from me with horror. They would never consent to have me for their queen when the truth should become known. They would not be moved by a mother's prayers. They would turn a deaf ear to everyone who should be bold enough to advise them to accept a princess with a speck in her heart, when they had thought they were getting one well deserving of the title they had bestowed upon her. Queen Galaxa knew that something must be done at once, that it would be time and labor lost to attempt to reason with the disappointed people, so she set to work thinking up some way out of her trouble. Now, it so happened, little Baron, that the very day I had come into the world, a babe had been born to one of Queen Galaxa's serving women. And so, hastily summoning the woman, she ordered her to bring her babe into the royal bedchamber and leave it there, promising that it should be brought up as my foster sister. But no sooner had the serving woman gone her way rejoicing than the nurse was ordered to change the children in the cradle, and in a few moments Glowstone was wrapped in my richly embroidered blanket, and I swathed up in her plain coverlets. How things went for several years I know not, but one day, how well I recollect it, my little mind was puzzled by hearing Crystallina cry out, "Nay, nay, dear mamma, 'tis not fair, I like it not. Each day when thou comest to us, thou givest Glowstone 10 kisses, and me but a single one." Then would Queen Galaxa smile a sad smile and bestow some bauble upon Crystallina to coax her back to contentment again. And so we went on, Crystallina and I, from one year to another until we were little maids well grown, and she sat on the throne and wore royal purple stitched with gold, and I plain white, but still most of the kisses fell to my share. And I marveled not a little at it, but dared not ask why it was. However, once when I was alone with Queen Galaxa, seated on my cushion in the corner plying my needle and thinking of the sail we were to have on the river that day, suddenly I was startled to see the queen throw herself on her knees in front of me, and to feel her clasp me in her arms and cover my face and head with tears and kisses as she sobbed and moaned, "Oh, my babe, my lost babe, my blessing and my joy, wilt never, never, never come back to me. Art gone forever, and must I give thee up, oh, must I?" "Nay, royal lady," I stammered in my more than wonder at her words and actions. "Thou art in a dream. Awake and see clearly I am not Crystallina. I am Glowstone, thy foster child. I'll hie me straight, and bring my royal sister to thee." But she would not let me loose. and for all answer showered more kisses on me till I was well nigh smothered. So tight she held me pressed against her bosom, while around and over me her long, thick tresses fell like a woven mantle. And then she told me all that I have told thee, little baron, and charged me never to impart it unto any soul in Goggle land, and I made a solemn promise unto her that I never would. And thou hast kept thy word like a true princess as thou art, said I cheerily, for I am not of thy world, fair Crystallina. Now that I have told thee the sad tale of the sorrowing princess with the speck in her heart, little baron, murmured Crystallina, fixing her large and radiant eyes upon me, there is but one thing more for me to do, and it is to let thee look through me, so that thou mayst know exactly what counsel to give. And so saying, the fair princess rose from her seat, and having placed herself in front of me with a flood of white light falling full upon her back, she lowered her black fan and bade me gaze upon the heavy heart which she had carried about with her all these years, and tell her exactly how large the speck was and where it lay, and what color it was. I was overjoyed to get an opportunity at last to look through one of the Mikkamenkies, and my own heart bounded with satisfaction as I looked and looked upon that mysterious little thing, nay, rather a tiny being, living, breathing, palpitating within her breast, now slow and measured as she dwelt in thought upon her sad fate, now beating faster and faster as the hope bubbled up in her mind that possibly I might be able to counsel her so wisely that an end would come to all her sorrow. Well, wise little baron, she murmured anxiously, what seest thou? Is it very large? In what part is it? Is it black as night, or some color less fatal? Take courage, fair princess, said I. It is very small and lies just beneath the bow on the left side. Nor is it black, but reddish rather, as if a single drop of blood from the veins of thy far distant ancestors had outlived them these thousands of years and hardened there to tell whence thy people came. The princess wept tears of joy upon hearing these comforting words. If it had been black, she whispered, I would have lain me down in this bed of violets and never risen more till my people had come to bear me to my grave. In the silent burial chamber, unvisited by the river of light, at this sad outbreak, Bulger whined piteously and licked the princess's hands as he looked up at her with his dark eyes radiant with sympathy. She was greatly cheered by this message of comfort, and it moved me too by its heartiness. List, fair princess, said I gravely. I own the task is not a light one, but hope for the best. I would that we had more time, but as thou knowest, Queen Galaxa's heart will soon run down. Therefore must we act with dispatch as well as wisdom. But first of all must I speak with the queen, and gain her consent to act for thee in this matter. That I fear me she will never grant, moaned Crystallina. However, thou art so much wiser than I. Do as best seems to thee. The next thing to be done, fair princess, I added solemnly, is to show thy heart boldly and fearlessly to thy people. Nay, little baron, she exclaimed, rising to her feet, that may not be, for know that our law doth make it treason itself for one of our people to look through a person of royal blood. Oh no, little baron, that may never be. Stay, sweet princess, I urged in gentlest tones. Not so fast. Thou dost not know what I mean by showing thy heart boldly to thy people. Never fear. I will not break the law of the land, and yet they shall look upon the speck within thy heart, and see how small it is, and hear what I have to say about it, and thou shalt not even be visible to them. Oh, little baron, murmured Crystallina, if this may only be, I feel they will forgive me. Thou art so wise, and thy words carry such strong hope to my poor heavy heart that I almost— Nay, fair princess, I interrupted, hope for the best, no more. I'm not wise enough to read the future, and from what I know of thy people, they seem but little different from mine own. Perchance, I may be able to sway them toward my views, and make them cry, Long live Princess Crystallina. But I can only promise thee to do my best. Betake thee now to the palace, and scorn not for yet a day or so to take up the golden comb and play the demoiselle glowstone in all humility. Baron Trump prepares to leave the kingdom of the Mikkamenkies people. Queen Galaxa's confession, Baron's speech to the men of Goggle land, and the journey back onto the Marble Highway. The first thing I did after the genuine Princess Crystallina had left me was to seek out Dr. Nebulosus and learn from him the exact number of hours before the Queen's heart would run down. As he had just been making an examination, he was able to tell the very minute it was 17 hours and 13 minutes, rather a short time, you must confess, dear friends, in which to accomplish such an important piece of business as I had in mind. I then made my way directly to the royal palace and demanded a private audience with the Lady of the Crystal Throne. With the advice of Sir Amber O'Pake and Lord Cornucore, she firmly but graciously refused to receive me, giving as an excuse that the excitement that would be sure to follow an interview with the Man of Coal, so the Mikkamenkies had named me, would shorten her life at least 13 minutes. But I was not to be put off in so unceremonious a manner. Sitting down, I seized a pen and wrote the following words upon a piece of glazed silk. To Galaxa, Queen of the Mikkamenkies, Lady of the Crystal Throne, I, Lord Bulger, a Mikkamenkian noble, bearer of this, who was the first to discover that the real princess was not sitting on the steps of the Crystal Throne, demand an audience for my master, Baron Sebastian von Trump, commonly known as Little Baron Trump, and prompted by him I ask, what are 13 minutes of thy life, O Queen Galaxa, to the long years of sorrow and disappointment in store for thy royal child? Taking this letter in his mouth, Bulger sprang away with long and rapid bounds. In a few minutes he was in the presence of the Queen, for the guards had fallen back affrighted as they saw him draw near with his dark eyes flashing indignation. Raising himself upon his hind feet, he laid the letter in Galaxa's hands. The moment she had read it, she fell into a swoon, and all was stir and commotion in and round about the palace. I was hastily summoned, and the audience chamber cleared of every attendant, save Dr. Nebulosus, Sir Amber O'Pake, Lord Cornucore, Lord Bulger, and me. Send for the Demoiselle Glowstone, commanded the Queen, and when she had appeared, to the amazement of all saving Bulger and me, Galaxa bade her mount the steps of the Crystal Throne. Then, having embraced her most tenderly, the Queen spoke these words. O faithful counselors and wise friends from the upper world, this is the real Princess Crystallina, whom I have for all these years wickedly and wrongfully kept from her high state and royal privileges. She was born with a speck in her heart, and I feared that it would be useless to ask my people to accept her as my successor. I, Lady of the Crystal Throne, exclaimed Lord Cornucore, thou hast wisely done. Thy people would never have received her as Princess Crystallina, for, being by the laws of our land denied the privilege to look for themselves, they never would have believed that this spot in the princess's heart was but a tiny speck, like a single hair crystal in the arm of thy magnificent throne. Therefore, O Queen, we counsel thee not to embitter thy last hours by differences with thy loving subjects. My Lord Cornucore, said I with a low bow, I make bold to raise my voice against thine, and I crave permission from Queen Galaxa to parley with her people. Forbid it, royal lady, cried Sir Amber O'Pake savagely, at which Bulger gave a low growl and showed his teeth. Queen Galaxa, I added gravely, a wrong confessed is half redressed. This fair princess, 'tis true, hath a speck in her heart which ill accords with the name bestowed upon her by thy people. Bid me be master until thy heart runs down, and by the knighthood of all the trumps, I promise thee that thou shalt have 3 hours of happiness ere thy royal heart has ceased to beat. Be it so, little baron, exclaimed Galaxa joyfully. I proclaim thee prime minister for the rest of my life. At these words, Bulger broke out into a series of glad barks, and, raising upon his hind legs, licked the queen's hand in token of his gratitude, while the fair princess looked a love at me that was too deep to put into words. I had now but a few hours to act. The excitement, so Dr. Nebulosus assured me, would shorten the queen's life a full hour. It had always been my custom to carry about with me a small but excellent magnifying glass, a double convex lens, for the purpose of making examinations of minute objects. and also for reading inscriptions too fine to be seen with the naked eye. Hastily summoning a skillful metal worker, I instructed him to set the lens in a short tube and to enclose that tube within another so that I could lengthen it at my pleasure. Then, having called together as many of the head men of the nation as the throne room would hold, I requested Lord Cornucore to inform them of the confession which Queen Galaxa had made, namely, that in reality Damozel Glowstone was Princess Crystallina, and Princess Crystallina was Damozel Glowstone. They were stricken speechless by this piece of information, but when Lord Cornucore went on to tell the whole story and to explain to them why the Queen had practiced this deception upon them, they broke out into the wildest lamentation, repeating over and over again in piteous tones, "A speck in her heart! A speck in her heart! O dire misfortune! O woeful day! She never can be our princess if she hath a speck in her heart." By this time my arrangements were complete. I had placed the Princess Crystallina just outside the door of the throne room where she stood concealed behind the thick hangings, and near her I had stationed Dr. Nebulosus with a large circular mirror of burnished silver in his hand. Calling out in a loud voice for silence, I thus addressed the weeping subjects of Queen Galaxa. "O Mikkamenkies, men of Goggle land, transparent folk, I count myself most happy to be among you at this hour, and to be permitted by your gracious queen to raise my voice in defense of the unfortunate princess with the speck in her heart. Being of noble birth and an inhabitant of another world, it was lawful for me to look through the sorrowing princess, and I have done it. Yes, Mikkamenkies, I have gazed upon her heart. I have seen the speck within it. Give ear, men of Goggle land, and you shall know how that speck came there. For it is not, as you doubtless think, a coal-black spot within that fair enclosure, clearer than the columns of Galaxa's throne. Oh, no, Mikkamenkies, 1,000 times no. It is a tiny blemish of reddish hue, a drop of princely blood from the upper world, which I inhabit. And this drop in all these countless centuries has coursed through the veins of 1,000 kings, and still kept its roseate glow, still remembered the glorious sunshine which called it into being. And now, men of Goggle land, lest you think that for some dark purpose of mine own I speak other than the pure and sober truth, behold, I show you the fair Crystallina's heart, in its very life and being as it is, being and throbbing with hope and fear commingled. Look and judge for yourselves." And with this I signaled to those on the outside of the palace to carry out my instructions. In an instant the thick curtains were drawn and the throne room was wrapped in darkness, and at the same moment Dr. Nebulosus, with his mirror, caught the strong white rays of light and threw them upon Crystallina's body, while I, through an opening in the hangings, made haste to apply the tube to which the lens had been fitted, and, catching the reflected image of her heart, threw it up in plain and startling view upon the opposite wall of the throne room. Upon seeing how small the speck was, and how truthfully I had described it, the Mikkamenkies fell a-weeping for purest joy, and then, as if with one voice, they burst out, "Long live the fair Princess Crystallina, with the ruby speck in her heart, and 10,000 blessings on the head of little Baron Trump and Lord Bulger for saving our land from cruel dissensions." The people on the outside took up the cry, and in a few moments the whole city was thronged with bands of Queen Galaxa's subjects, singing and dancing and telling of their love for the fair princess with the ruby speck in her heart. I had kept my word. Queen Galaxa would have at least 3 hours of complete happiness ere her heart ran down. But suddenly the river of light began to flicker and dim its flood of brilliant white rays. Night was coming. Noiselessly, as if by magic, the Mikkamenkies faded from my sight, stealing away in search of beds, and as the gloom crept into the great throne room, someone plucked me gently by the hand, and a soft voice whispered, I love thee. Oh, who other than I can tell how I love thee?" And then a grip stronger than that gentle hand seized me by the skirt of my coat and dragged me away slowly but surely, away through the darkness, through the gloom, out into the silent streets, ever away until at last that soft voice, choking with a sob, ceased its pleading and gasped, "Farewell, oh farewell, I dare go no farther." And so Bulger, in his wisdom, led me on and ever on out of the city of the Mikkamenkies out upon the marble highway.